My brother announced that I was adopted at the family reunion because I refused to sign over Grandpa's house. Everyone gasped until I showed them the real documents proving he's the one who isn't blood-related. You see, I've known about this for 3 years. When Grandpa got sick, he told me everything. My parents had trouble conceiving after having me. They adopted my brother Tyler when I was 2, but they never told him. They never told anyone. Grandpa only told me because he wanted me to understand why he was leaving me the house. Tyler's had everything handed to him his whole life, Grandpa said from his hospital bed. You worked every summer at my shop. You learned the value of things. The house goes to you. Tyler always assumed he'd get the house. He's the son, after all. In his mind, daughters don't inherit property. When he turned 18, he actually told Grandpa that he was looking forward to taking over the house someday. It's tradition, Tyler said. Oldest son gets the family home. Grandpa just nodded and changed the subject. Tyler started planning renovations before Grandpa was even gone. He'd bring his girlfriend Esther over, and they'd walk through rooms, talking about knocking down walls and updating the kitchen. This place will be perfect once we fix it up, Esther would say. And Tyler would agree, never asking Grandpa how he felt about their plans. Meanwhile, I spent every summer working in Grandpa's auto shop. Tyler never worked there, said the grease would ruin his clothes. When the will was read and I got the house, he lost it. This is wrong, he screamed at the lawyer. I'm the oldest. I'm the son. That house should be mine. The lawyer just shrugged. The will is very clear. Tyler stood up so fast his chair fell over. He wasn't in his right mind. Amy manipulated him. Your grandfather was of sound mind, the lawyer said firmly. I have the medical documentation if you'd like to contest it in court. That's when Tyler started digging. He paid for ancestry tests, convinced he'd find something to prove I wasn't really family. He spent weeks researching, calling distant relatives, building his case. When my results came back showing no biological connection to our parents, he thought he'd hit gold. What he didn't know was that I'm actually Grandpa's biological granddaughter through his first marriage. Dad was from Grandpa's first wife, who died young. Dad was adopted by Grandpa's second wife, who raised him as her own. So technically, I showed no connection to my legal grandmother, but I'm still blood to Grandpa. Tyler never bothered to test himself. Why would he? He was so sure of his place in the family. The morning of the family reunion, Tyler showed up at my door with Esther and a folder of papers. Sign the house over to me, or I tell everyone you're not real family. His girlfriend Esther stood behind him, smirking. Just sign it, Amy. You know you don't deserve that house anyway. Tyler's the real heir. We'll even let you visit sometimes, Tyler added generously. Maybe at Christmas. If you're good. No, I said simply. Tyler's face turned red. Then you're finished. Everyone's going to know what you really are. A fake. A fraud. Someone who stole from the real family. Esther pulled out her phone. We already made copies of everything. One click and it goes to everyone. Do what you need to do, I said, closing the door. The reunion was at Aunt Lisa's place. About 40 relatives all gathered for our annual summer gathering. Tyler waited until everyone was eating to make his announcement. He actually brought a wireless microphone he'd bought just for this moment. He tapped it twice to get everyone's attention. Everyone, I have something important to share about Amy and the inheritance situation. He pulled out a folder dramatically. Amy is not biologically related to this family. I have the DNA results right here. She's been pretending to be one of us, and she stole my rightful inheritance. He held up the papers like evidence in a courtroom. See? No biological match to Mom or Dad. She's been lying to all of us. The silence was thick. Everyone turned to look at me. Some relatives were already whispering. Cousin Janet covered her mouth in shock. Uncle Ray shook his head. Esther was recording everything on her phone, probably for their social media later. This is why Grandpa's house should come to me, Tyler continued, gaining confidence. I'm the actual blood relative, the real grandson. I stayed calm and pulled out my own folder. Tyler's right. I'm not biologically related to Mom. But before you all turn on me, maybe Tyler should share his own DNA results. What are you talking about? He laughed nervously. I don't need a test. I look exactly like Dad. Do you, though? I opened my folder. Because I have here adoption records from 1998. Tyler James, adopted at 3 months old by Lorna and Daniel Quinn. That's you, Tyler. You're the adopted one. His face went white. Nobody moves for what feels like a full minute but is probably only 10 seconds. Tyler stands there at the front of the yard holding that stupid wireless microphone, his mouth opening and closing like he wants to say something but can't make words come out. The color has drained completely from his face and I can see his hands shaking even from where I'm sitting 20 feet away. 40 pairs of eyes bounce between Tyler and me and back again, and the only sound is someone's kid crying in the distance and the hum of Aunt Lisa's bug zapper. Tyler's grip on the microphone tightens until his knuckles go white, and then his voice comes out all cracked and wrong when he finally speaks. He says that's not possible, then says it again louder, then keeps repeating it like if he says it enough times it'll become true. Esther grabs his arm hard and leans in close to whisper something in his ear, her face tight with what looks like anger or maybe panic. Tyler shakes his head over and over, pulling away from her a little, and that's when the relatives start talking all at once. Someone near the food table gasps loud enough that everyone hears it. A couple of the older aunts start whispering behind their hands. Uncle Ray says something I can't quite hear, but his tone is sharp and demanding. Mom stands up so fast her folding chair scrapes against the concrete patio, with a horrible screech that makes everyone stop talking for a second. Her face is red and blotchy, and she's already got tears starting down her cheeks. She says we need to take this inside, away from everyone, her voice shaking but trying to sound firm. Dad sits there looking like someone punched him in the stomach, staring down at his plate of half-eaten potato salad. He won't look at Tyler or me or anyone else. When Mom says his name sharp and insistent, he finally nods and stands up slow like his legs don't want to work right. He's aged about 10 years in the last 5 minutes, all the color gone from his face except for 2 spots of red high on his cheeks. Aunt Lisa jumps up too and starts trying to do damage control, suggesting maybe everyone should take a break and have some dessert. She gestures toward the table where 3 different pies and a chocolate cake sit untouched. But nobody's moving toward the food because everyone's too busy staring or whispering to whoever's standing next to them. Uncle Ray's voice cuts through the chatter, loud and demanding, asking if someone wants to explain what the hell is going on here. A few people nod in agreement, clearly wanting answers right now. Tyler drops the microphone on the nearest picnic table with a loud thunk that makes the speakers squeal with feedback. He storms across the yard toward me, weaving between relatives who step back to make room for him. Esther follows right behind him, her heels clicking on the concrete. Tyler's face has gone from white to red now, and his voice shakes when he demands to see the adoption papers I mentioned. He stops about 3 feet from where I'm sitting and points at me with one shaking finger. He says I'm lying, that the documents have to be fake, that there's no way what I'm saying is true. His voice gets louder with each word and spit flies from his mouth. Esther stands behind him with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable now instead of the smug look she had earlier when she was recording Tyler's big announcement. Several relatives have moved closer to watch this confrontation, forming a loose circle around us. I can feel Janet standing somewhere to my left, and Uncle Ray off to my right, everyone waiting to see what happens next. I pull the folder out from under my chair where I'd tucked it earlier, my hands steady even though my heart is pounding. I stand up and hand Tyler the certified copies of his adoption records from 1998, the papers I'd gotten from the county clerk's office 3 weeks ago when I knew this confrontation was coming. The folder has his full name typed on the tab and an official seal on the first page. Tyler snatches it from me and his hands shake so bad the papers rattle as he opens the folder. His eyes scan the first page, then the second, then he goes back to the first page like he's trying to find something that proves they're fake. The court documents have the judge's signature right there at the bottom, dark blue ink that's faded a bit with age but still clearly legible. Esther reads over his shoulder, standing on her tiptoes to see, and I watch her face change as she takes in what she's reading. Her mouth gets thin and tight and something flickers in her eyes that might be calculation or might be anger. I can't quite tell. Tyler flips through all 6 pages twice, his breathing getting faster and more ragged. Mom makes a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp and starts moving toward Tyler with her arms out like she wants to hug him. She's crying openly now, tears running down her face and dripping off her chin. She says, "Honey, we were going to tell you," her voice breaking on every word. Tyler backs away from her like she's a stranger, or maybe something dangerous, nearly tripping over someone's diaper bag that got left on the ground. He holds the papers up between them like a shield and shakes his head hard. Mom stops moving and just stands there with her arms still half raised, looking lost. Dad finally speaks up from where he's been standing frozen near their table. He says they thought it was better to wait until Tyler was older, that they wanted him to feel secure in the family first, then they just never found the right time to have that conversation. His voice sounds hollow and defensive, and he still won't quite meet Tyler's eyes. He says something about how they loved him the same as me, how being adopted didn't make him any less their son, but the words sound rehearsed and empty even to my ears. Esther suddenly steps back from Tyler and pulls her phone out of her purse with quick, jerky movements. She says she needs to leave, her voice tight and clipped, and starts tapping at her phone screen to call an Uber. Her face has gone hard and closed off in a way I've never seen before. Tyler turns to her and his voice goes high and desperate when he begs her to stay. He says they can figure this out together, that he needs her right now, reaching for her arm. She pulls away from his touch and says she needs time to process this, still not looking at him, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. The Uber app makes that little ding sound confirming her ride. Tyler asks her to please just wait, to not leave him like this, but she's already walking toward the side gate that leads to the front of the house. Her heels click fast on the concrete and she doesn't look back even when Tyler calls her name one more time. The gate swings shut behind her with a bang that seems louder than it should be. Janet appears next to me, having worked her way through the crowd of relatives. She asks quietly if I knew about this before today, keeping her voice low so only I can hear. I admit I've known for 3 years, since Grandpa told me from his hospital bed. Her expression shifts right in front of me, going from concern to something between understanding and judgment. She says she gets why I didn't tell Tyler myself, that it wasn't really my place to share that information. But then she asks if humiliating him publicly like this was really necessary, if maybe I could have found a better way to handle the situation. Her words hit me harder than I expected, and my stomach twists with guilt I wasn't prepared to feel. I want to defend myself, to remind her that Tyler tried to humiliate me first, but the words stick in my throat. Around us, relatives are starting to pick sides, some looking at Tyler with obvious pity, while others are giving me looks that range from disappointed to openly hostile. Tyler walks over to the nearest empty chair and basically falls into it, still holding those adoption papers in both hands. The chair is one of those cheap plastic ones and it creaks under his weight. He's reading through the documents again, his eyes moving over the same lines he's already read twice before, like he's hoping the words will change if he just looks hard enough. Tears start running down his face, big ones that drip onto the papers and make small dark spots on the white pages. He's not making any sound, just sitting there crying silently while he reads. Several relatives are watching him with pity written all over their faces. Aunt Carol has her hand over her mouth and looks like she might cry too. Uncle Mike shakes his head slowly like he's watching something tragic unfold, but then I catch other relatives looking at me instead, and their expressions aren't sympathetic at all. Cousin Beth crosses her arms and gives me a look that clearly says I'm the bad guy here. Uncle Ray's wife Martha whispers something to the person next to her while staring right at me. I realize with a sinking feeling that being right about Tyler's adoption doesn't automatically make me feel good about what just happened. Doesn't erase the fact that I just destroyed my brother's entire understanding of who he is in front of 40 people who will talk about this for years. Aunt Lisa's voice cuts through the whispers and staring. She claps her hands twice and announces that the immediate family needs to go inside and talk privately. She suggests everyone else should probably head home for now. The crowd doesn't move at first, like they're waiting for more drama to unfold. Then Uncle Ray starts gathering his dishes from the food table. That breaks the spell and other relatives begin moving too, picking up their containers and bags. They walk slowly toward their cars, looking back over their shoulders every few steps. I hear Aunt Carol whisper to someone about how she never would have guessed Tyler was adopted. Cousin Beth says something about how I could have handled this better. The conversations multiply as people reach the driveway, voices getting louder now that they're farther from us. Tyler hasn't moved from his chair. He's still reading those adoption papers, tears dripping onto the pages. Esther is long gone, her Uber probably already halfway across town. Mom stands near Tyler but doesn't touch him. Dad has his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. The backyard empties out over the next 10 minutes until it's just our small group and Aunt Lisa. She walks toward the back door of her house and holds it open, waiting for us to follow. Inside Aunt Lisa's living room, the air conditioning feels too cold after being in the summer heat. Aunt Lisa sits in her recliner and makes it clear she's not leaving her own house for this conversation. Mom and Dad take the couch. Tyler drops into the armchair near the window, still holding those papers. I stay standing near the doorway because sitting feels too casual for what's about to happen. Mom starts talking first, her voice shaky. She explains how they tried for years to have another baby after me but couldn't. She says they adopted Tyler when he was 3 months old because they wanted to give me a sibling. She insists they loved him exactly the same as they loved me, that being adopted never made him less their son. Tyler cuts her off mid-sentence. He asks if that's why I got Grandpa's house instead of him. His voice is flat now, not angry, just empty. Mom looks confused and says the house has nothing to do with adoption. Dad shifts on the couch and clears his throat. Dad explains that Grandpa made his own decisions about the inheritance and they never interfered. He says Grandpa had his reasons, and they respected his wishes even if they didn't fully agree. Tyler's face flushes red and he shoots back that Grandpa only chose me because he knew Tyler wasn't really family. The words hang in the air for a second. I can't stay quiet anymore. I point out that Tyler never bothered to work at the shop or spend time with Grandpa unless he wanted something. Tyler's jaw clenches, and I know I hit a nerve. I remind him how Grandpa asked him every summer to come work at the shop, and Tyler always said no. How Tyler only visited when he needed money or wanted Grandpa to fix his car for free. Tyler stands up fast, the chair rocking back. He says that's not fair, that I'm twisting everything to make him look bad. Tyler starts listing everything he thinks proves our parents treated me better. He brings up how they paid for my college completely but made him take out loans. Mom's eyes go wide and she looks genuinely shocked. She explains that by the time Tyler went to college, Dad had been laid off from his job. The money just wasn't there anymore. She says they felt terrible about it, but they were barely keeping up with the mortgage. Tyler shakes his head and says there's always an excuse. He mentions how I got a car for my 16th birthday, and he had to buy his own. Dad points out that Tyler wrecked 2 cars in his first year of driving, and insurance was already costing them a fortune. Tyler says that's beside the point. He keeps going, bringing up birthday parties and Christmas presents and family vacations. Mom and Dad try to defend each decision, explaining circumstances and timing. Their voices start overlapping as everyone talks at once. The conversation falls apart into Tyler just listing every single thing from our childhood that felt unfair to him. Mom and Dad keep trying to explain their choices, but Tyler doesn't want to hear about money problems or timing or circumstances. He wants someone to admit they loved me more. Aunt Lisa finally stands up from her recliner and says everyone needs to stop. She says Tyler needs time to process this information about being adopted. She suggests we should all go home and talk again when emotions aren't so high. Her voice is firm, the kind that doesn't leave room for argument. Mom nods and stands up. Dad follows her lead. Tyler doesn't move from where he's standing. I walk toward the front door without saying anything. We all leave through the front. Our cars parked along the street. Nobody hugs goodbye. Tyler stays inside with Aunt Lisa for a few more minutes. I sit in my car and watch Mom and Dad drive away first. Then I start my engine and leave too. Over the next 3 days, I try calling Tyler 6 times. Every call goes to voicemail. I send him 4 text messages asking if we can talk. He doesn't respond to any of them. Mom calls me on the second day and says Tyler isn't answering her calls either. She sounds exhausted, her voice thin and stretched. She admits they should have told him about the adoption years ago. I can hear Dad in the background saying something about how they thought they were protecting him by keeping it secret. Mom asks if I think Tyler will ever forgive them. I don't know what to say to that. She starts crying before we hang up. On the third day, I check Tyler's social media accounts, but he hasn't posted anything. His last post is from 2 weeks ago, a picture of him and Esther at some restaurant. I wonder if she's talked to him at all since she left the reunion. Esther posts something on social media that night. It's vague, just a quote about finding out people aren't who you thought they were. The post gets dozens of comments within an hour. People ask what happened and if she's okay. She doesn't respond to any of them, but she likes a few comments that say things like, "You deserve better," and "Trust your instincts." I resist the urge to comment or defend myself. I know that would just make everything worse. But then I notice several family members have shared her post. Cousin Beth adds her own comment about how family secrets always come out eventually. Uncle Ray's wife shares it with some cryptic message about loyalty. I close the app and put my phone face down on my coffee table. I don't want to see anymore. Cousin Janet calls me the next morning while I'm making breakfast. She says Tyler contacted her yesterday asking questions about family history. He wanted to know if anyone else knew he was adopted. Janet's voice is tight with guilt. She admits she'd heard rumors over the years but never knew for sure. She says Aunt Carol mentioned something once about Mom and Dad adopting a baby, but it was so long ago and nobody ever talked about it directly. Janet feels guilty now for not saying something to Tyler sooner. I tell her it wasn't her place to tell him. She says she knows, but she still feels bad. We talk for a few more minutes before she has to go to work. After we hang up, I realize Tyler is probably calling everyone in the family, trying to figure out who knew and who didn't. I need to drive past Grandpa's house to get to the grocery store. I take the route I always take, not thinking about it until I turn onto his street. My street now. The house comes into view and my stomach drops. Someone spray-painted the word thief across the garage door in red paint. The letters are huge, at least 2 feet tall, dripping down the white door. I pull into the driveway and just sit there staring at it. My hands shake on the steering wheel. I know it had to be Tyler, or maybe someone he convinced to do it for him. I grab my phone and call the police non-emergency number. The dispatcher says an officer will come out to take a report. I wait in my car for 20 minutes before a police cruiser pulls up. The officer is older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair at his temples. He walks around the garage taking pictures with his phone. He asks me if I know who might have done this. I tell him about the situation with my brother and the inheritance. He writes everything down in a small notebook. Then he says that without proof Tyler did it, there's not much they can do besides document the incident. He suggests I install security cameras before anything else happens. He asks if I want to press charges if they figure out who's responsible. I sit with that question for a minute. The idea of getting my brother arrested makes me feel sick, but the idea of him getting away with this makes me angry. I tell the officer I need to think about it. He nods and hands me a case number on a business card. He says I should call if anything else happens. After he leaves, I sit on the front steps of the house and stare at that red word on the garage door. This whole thing is escalating way beyond hurt feelings and family arguments. I wonder where it stops. I sit there for maybe 10 minutes before my phone rings. Mom's name flashes on the screen and I consider not answering, but I know that will just make things worse. I swipe to accept and hear her crying before she even says hello. She tells me Tyler moved out of his apartment 3 days ago and won't tell them where he's staying. She's been calling him constantly, but he only responds with short texts saying he needs space. Her voice breaks when she begs me to reach out to him and try to make peace. I remind her that Tyler's the one who tried to publicly humiliate me at the reunion. I point out that I was just defending myself with the truth. She says she knows, but he's still her son, and she's worried about his mental state. I tell her I'll think about it and hang up before she can push harder. I finally get up from the steps and drive to the hardware store to buy paint remover and brushes. The whole drive I keep thinking about Tyler somewhere alone, probably spiraling, and I hate that I feel guilty about it. 2 days later, I'm in my apartment making dinner when someone knocks on my door. I look through the peephole and see Dad standing there looking uncomfortable. I open the door and he asks if he can come in. We sit at my kitchen table and he gets straight to the point. He admits Tyler had been asking them for money for months before Grandpa died. Tyler claimed he had credit card debt from helping Esther with her student loans. Dad reveals that Tyler owes close to $30,000. He was counting on selling Grandpa's house to pay it off. Dad's hands shake slightly as he talks, and I realize this is hard for him to tell me. He says that's why Tyler was so desperate to get the inheritance. It wasn't just about pride or tradition. He needed that money to avoid financial ruin. I ask why they didn't tell me this before, and Dad says they thought it was Tyler's private business. They kept hoping he'd figure it out on his own. Mom wanted to help him, but they don't have that kind of money to give. Dad looks older than I've ever seen him as he admits they failed both of us by keeping so many secrets. I feel sympathy and frustration mixing together in my chest. Tyler's financial situation explains his desperation, but it doesn't excuse how he treated me. I tell Dad this and he nods slowly. He says Tyler made bad choices and needs to face the consequences. But he's still their son, and they're worried about him spiraling into something worse. I can hear how torn Dad is between supporting both of his children. He asks if there's any way I'd consider helping Tyler financially. I remind him that Grandpa left the house to me specifically because Tyler never learned the value of things. Giving him money now would just enable the same patterns Grandpa was trying to break. Dad sighs and says he knew I'd say that, but he had to ask. Before he leaves, he hugs me tight and tells me he's proud of how I handled myself at the reunion. He says he just wishes the truth hadn't come out that way. 3 days after Dad's visit, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. I answer and hear Esther's voice, cold and businesslike. She says we need to talk in person. I agree to meet her at a coffee shop near my work, curious about what she wants. When I arrive, she's already sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She pushes one toward me and wastes no time getting to the point. She tells me she's breaking up with Tyler. Her voice is flat, like she's discussing a business transaction. She says she can't deal with his identity crisis and the fact that he lied about his financial situation. I realize the house was a bigger factor in their relationship than I'd thought. She talks about Tyler like he's a failed investment rather than someone she supposedly loved. I ask if she's here to blame me for ruining her plans. She says no. She's here to be honest about what happened because she thinks I deserve to know the truth. Esther leans forward and admits she encouraged Tyler to confront me at the reunion. They'd planned to sell the house and use the money for a down payment on their own place. She'd already picked out neighborhoods and started looking at listings. When Tyler found out about my DNA results, she pushed him to use them as leverage. She thought if he exposed me publicly, I'd be too humiliated to fight back. Her face shows more anger about losing that financial opportunity than about Tyler's emotional pain. She says she wasted 2 years on someone who turned out to be broke and adopted. I feel my hands tighten around my coffee cup. I tell her Tyler's better off without someone who only valued him for money he didn't have. She shrugs and says maybe, but she's not going to stick around to find out. When she leaves, I feel oddly grateful that she's showing her true colors now, rather than after potentially marrying my brother. At least Tyler can see what kind of person she really is. That night, Tyler finally responds to my messages. The text is long and formal, clearly written with legal advice. He says he's hired Gilbert Thornton as a lawyer to contest Grandpa's will. He claims Grandpa was manipulated by me during his illness. The text is cold, using phrases like undue influence and mental capacity concerns. It ends with a warning that I should get my own lawyer because he's not giving up the house without a fight. I read it 3 times, feeling my anger build with each pass. This is so different from the Tyler I grew up with. Or maybe this is exactly who he always was, and I just didn't want to see it. I forward the text to the estate lawyer who handled Grandpa's will and ask for a meeting as soon as possible. The estate lawyer's office is downtown, in a building that smells like old paper and coffee. She sits across from me reviewing the text Tyler sent. She assures me the will is solid. Grandpa was thoroughly evaluated as being of sound mind when he made it. She pulls out a thick file and shows me medical records, psychiatric evaluations, and witness statements. She explains that Tyler can try to contest it, but he'll likely just waste money on legal fees. The evaluation was done by 2 different doctors specifically to prevent this kind of challenge. She recommends I don't engage with his threats and let the legal process play out. She says responding directly will only escalate things and make it look like I'm worried. I ask how long this could take, and she estimates anywhere from 3 months to a year depending on how hard Tyler pushes. She says most will contests fail, and this one has even less merit than usual. I leave her office feeling slightly better but still anxious about the fight ahead. 2 weeks later, an official letter arrives from Gilbert Thornton's office. The envelope is thick and formal with a law firm logo. Inside is a demand that I sign over the house to Tyler within 30 days or face a lawsuit. The letter cites undue influence and questions Grandpa's mental capacity. It makes me furious because it's essentially calling Grandpa senile and me manipulative. Every paragraph twists the truth into something ugly. It suggests I isolated Grandpa from Tyler, that I poisoned his mind against his own grandson, that I took advantage of an old man's confusion. I immediately forward it to the estate lawyer. She calls me within an hour and says she'll handle the response. Her voice is calm and professional as she tells me this is a standard intimidation tactic. She says Gilbert Thornton is known for aggressive opening moves but rarely follows through to actual court. She'll send a response that makes it clear we're not intimidated, and we have documentation to back up every aspect of the will. Mom calls me the next day begging me to consider some kind of compromise with Tyler. Her voice is desperate and pleading. She suggests maybe I could sell him the house at a reduced price or let him live there and pay me rent. I remind her that Tyler has $30,000 in debt. He can't afford to buy the house even at a reduced price. He probably can't even pay market rate rent. Besides, Grandpa specifically left the house to me because he wanted me to have it. Mom starts crying and says she just wants her family back together. She says this is tearing everyone apart, and maybe if I showed some flexibility, Tyler would calm down. I tell her I'm not rewarding Tyler's behavior by giving up what Grandpa left me. She says I'm being stubborn, and I say she's enabling Tyler like she always has. We hang up angry with each other. Cousin Janet calls me a few days later with information I didn't want to hear. She tells me Tyler has been calling various family members trying to get them to pressure me into giving up the house. He's been telling people his version of events where I manipulated Grandpa and stole his inheritance. Some relatives are sympathetic to him and think I should share the inheritance equally. Others think he's being entitled and needs to accept reality. Janet says the family is splitting into camps and it's getting uncomfortable at gatherings. Uncle Ray apparently got into an argument with Aunt Lisa about it at a birthday party. Cousin Beth posted something on social media about family loyalty that was clearly directed at me. Janet says she's staying neutral, but she wanted me to know what's happening. I thank her for telling me and hang up feeling sick. This conflict is spreading through the family like poison, and I don't know how to stop it without giving up the house, which I'm not going to do. The next week, my estate lawyer calls to tell me she's filed her response to Gilbert Thornton's demand letter. She sounds satisfied as she walks me through what she included. Medical records from 3 different doctors who evaluated Grandpa in the year before he died, all confirming he was completely mentally sharp. Written statements from 5 employees who worked at the shop over the years, describing how I came in every summer and learned the business while Tyler never showed interest. Even some regular customers sent letters talking about how they remembered me as a teenager, asking questions and helping out. She assembled everything into a document that basically destroys any claim that Grandpa wasn't thinking clearly or that I manipulated him. The response also includes photos of me at the shop from different years, time cards showing my hours worked, and even some old emails between me and Grandpa discussing repairs and business decisions. My lawyer says it's one of the most thoroughly documented estate cases she's handled, and Tyler's team would be foolish to push this to court. She sounds almost excited about how strong our position is. A few days later, she calls again to say that Gilbert Thornton contacted her about mediation. Her tone shifts to something more strategic as she explains what this means. When the other side suggests mediation instead of going forward with their lawsuit, it usually means they know their case is weak, and they're looking for a way out that doesn't involve admitting they were wrong. She recommends I agree to mediation anyway, because if this somehow does end up in front of a judge, it looks good that I was willing to try to resolve things peacefully. She's confident we'd win in court based on the evidence, but mediation might end this faster and cheaper for everyone involved. I agree, even though the thought of sitting across a table from Tyler makes my stomach hurt. I haven't seen him since that day at Aunt Lisa's when his whole world fell apart, and I'm not looking forward to facing him in person. Before we can even schedule the mediation, Aunt Lisa calls me one evening. Her voice is shaky and upset as she tells me what happened at a family barbecue that afternoon. Tyler showed up drunk, which apparently nobody expected because he usually doesn't drink much. He started talking loudly about me in the house, his words slurring as he went on about how everyone always loved me more and treated him like he didn't matter. Aunt Lisa says he was crying and yelling at the same time, saying that being adopted made him a second-class family member, and that's why Grandpa chose me. Uncle Ray tried to calm him down, but Tyler pushed him away and started throwing things. He knocked over a table full of food and threw someone's phone across the yard. It took 3 relatives to physically remove him from the property, and Aunt Lisa says she's never seen him like that before. She sounds worried about his mental state, asking if I think he needs professional help. And I don't know what to tell her because I'm angry at Tyler for what he tried to do to me, but I also feel bad that he's falling apart like this. That evening, I decide to go through some of Grandpa's boxes that I've been avoiding since moving into the house. I find several journals in the bottom of a box from his bedroom closet. They're just regular notebooks, the kind you can buy at any store, filled with Grandpa's neat handwriting. I start reading and discover he kept detailed notes about family interactions and observations over the years. There are entries about me coming to the shop, asking questions about how different tools worked, and why certain repairs were done specific ways. He wrote about teaching me to change oil and rotate tires, noting how I paid attention and remembered what he showed me. Then there are entries about Tyler's visits, which were much less frequent. Grandpa documented how Tyler usually only came by when he needed money, or wanted Grandpa to buy him something. One entry from when Tyler was 19 describes him asking for $200 for car insurance, then leaving as soon as Grandpa handed over the cash without staying to visit. Another entry talks about Tyler complaining that the shop was dirty and asking why Grandpa didn't just sell the business and retire. I find the entry from 2 years before Grandpa died that mentions Tyler bringing Esther over. Grandpa wrote about how they walked through his house discussing renovation plans, talking about knocking down walls and updating the kitchen without ever asking if he was okay with their ideas. He wrote that it confirmed what he already knew about the boy's character, that Tyler saw the house as something he was entitled to, rather than something that might be earned. There's another entry about Grandpa trying to talk to Tyler about learning a trade or developing real skills beyond his office job. Tyler apparently told him that kind of thinking was old-fashioned, and that successful people these days didn't need to know how to fix things with their hands. Grandpa wrote that he felt sad hearing that because it showed how differently Tyler saw the world compared to how he'd tried to raise his grandson. He noted that Tyler dismissed practical skills as beneath him, while constantly struggling with money and asking for help. Reading through all these journals makes me feel more secure in Grandpa's decision to leave me the house. He clearly thought about this for years, not just at the end when he was sick, But I also feel sad about the whole situation and the family dynamics that led to it. Grandpa obviously loved Tyler. There are entries where he talks about hoping Tyler would mature and find his way. But he was disappointed in how Tyler turned out, in the entitlement and lack of work ethic. I can see from the journals how Mom and Dad's attempts to treat us equally actually made things worse. They gave Tyler everything he asked for, trying to prove they loved him as much as me, but that just taught him to expect things without earning them. Meanwhile, they took my work ethic for granted, assuming I'd be fine because I was more independent. Grandpa saw all of this happening and tried to correct it the only way he could, by making his will reflect the reality of who put in effort and who didn't. 2 weeks later, I arrive at the mediation session at Gilbert Thornton's office. Tyler is already there when I walk in with my lawyer. He looks terrible, like he hasn't been sleeping or eating properly in weeks. His clothes hang loose on him and there are dark circles under his eyes. He won't make eye contact with me, just stares at the table in front of him while Gilbert Thornton sets up papers and a recording device. The mediator is a woman in her 50s who introduces herself and explains how the process will work. Gilbert Thornton does most of the talking for Tyler's side, presenting what he calls a revised argument. He says that while the will might be legally valid, there's still a question of fairness. He suggests that Tyler deserves something from the estate, even if not the whole house, proposing that I could give him a cash settlement as a gesture of family goodwill. He throws around numbers like $50,000, which makes my lawyer shift in her seat next to me. My lawyer responds calmly but firmly. She points out that Grandpa's will was very specific about his wishes, and there are no other significant assets to divide beyond the house. The house is mine free and clear with no mortgage, and Grandpa's savings were minimal because he lived simply. She notes that the will itself explains Grandpa's reasoning, that he wanted the house to go to someone who understood the value of work and would appreciate what he built. The mediator listens to both sides and then turns to me. She asks if I'd be willing to offer Tyler anything as a gesture of family goodwill, even though I'm not legally required to do so. Everyone's eyes are on me as I sit there thinking about what to say. I can feel Tyler watching me now, even though he still won't meet my eyes directly. My lawyer touches my arm gently, a reminder that whatever I decide is my choice. I take a breath and say I'm willing to give Tyler some of Grandpa's tools from the shop. There are extra sets of wrenches and equipment that I don't need, things that have value but aren't particularly sentimental to me. I also offer him $5,000, which is a lot of money, but not enough to enable his debt problems, or make him think his behavior was okay. I make it clear that this is a one-time offer to end the conflict, not because I think he deserves it, but because I want this to be over. Tyler's face flushes red as soon as I finish talking. He starts to argue, his voice rising as he says $5,000 is insulting compared to what the house is worth, but Gilbert Thornton puts a hand on his arm to stop him. The lawyer clearly recognizes that pushing harder will only make things worse, that my offer is more generous than what they'd get if this went to court. The mediator asks if we can take a break, so both sides can discuss the proposal privately. During the break, Tyler approaches me in the hallway when the lawyers step away to make phone calls. His voice is hollow and flat as he says he's sorry for the spray paint on the garage door. He looks defeated, his shoulders slumped and his hands shaking slightly. He admits he did it in a moment of rage after Esther broke up with him and he knows it was wrong. He says losing both the house and his girlfriend forced him to face reality in a way he couldn't before. I can see that something has broken in him, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that's forcing him to grow up. He tells me Esther only dated him because she thought he came from money and would inherit property. When she found out he was broke and adopted, she lost interest immediately. He sounds genuinely hurt rather than angry for the first time since this whole thing started. I don't know what to say to him, so I just nod and we stand there in awkward silence until the lawyers come back to continue the mediation. The mediation resumes after the break, and everyone settles back into their chairs around the conference table. My lawyer leans over and whispers that she thinks we can close this out today if I'm willing to stick with my offer. Tyler sits across from me looking smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched forward and his hands folded on the table in front of him. Gilbert Thornton speaks first, saying his client is prepared to accept my proposal of $10,000 and certain personal items from the estate. He lists out the specific tools Tyler wants, mostly the extra wrenches and some equipment from the shop that I already said I'd give him. The mediator asks if I agree to these terms and I say yes, even though part of me thinks Tyler doesn't deserve anything after what he tried to do. My lawyer adds that in exchange, Tyler must immediately withdraw his legal challenge and sign paperwork, stating he has no further claim to the house or estate. Gilbert nods and says they accept those conditions. The mediator starts drafting the settlement agreement right there on her laptop, reading portions out loud to make sure everyone understands what they're signing. Tyler doesn't say much during this part, just nods when Gilbert asks if he agrees to various clauses. The whole process takes about 40 minutes of going through legal language and making small adjustments to the wording. When the mediator finally prints out the agreement, she slides copies across the table for everyone to review. Mom and Dad arrive just as we're finishing up the paperwork review, because my lawyer had called them earlier to say we might reach a settlement today. Mom's eyes are red like she's been crying on the drive over, and Dad keeps his arm around her shoulders as they take seats along the wall behind us. The mediator explains that we've reached an agreement and asks if the parents want to review it before we sign. Mom shakes her head and says she just wants this to be over, her voice cracking on the last word. We all sign the settlement documents in the order the mediator indicates, with her notarizing each signature. Tyler's hand shakes slightly as he writes his name, and I notice he has to steady his wrist with his other hand to keep the pen from wobbling. When the last signature is done, the mediator congratulates us on reaching a resolution and says she'll file the paperwork with the court. Mom immediately stands up and crosses the room to hug both me and Tyler at the same time, pulling us together in this awkward three-way embrace while she sobs into our shoulders. She keeps saying, "Thank God it's over. Thank God," over and over. Dad approaches more slowly and puts his hand on Tyler's shoulder, asking if they can talk outside for a minute. Tyler nods and follows Dad out into the hallway, while I stay behind to go over next steps with my lawyer. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I can see Dad talking to Tyler with his hand still on his shoulder, and Tyler nodding while wiping at his eyes with his sleeve. It's the first real father-son moment I've seen between them in weeks, maybe longer. A week passes before Tyler calls me. I'm at work when my phone buzzes with his name on the screen, and I almost don't answer because I'm not sure I'm ready to talk to him yet. But I pick up on the fourth ring, and he asks if he can come by Grandpa's house to collect the items we agreed on in the settlement. His voice sounds different, calmer and less angry than I've heard it since this whole mess started. I tell him Saturday morning works, and he says he'll be there around 10. When Saturday comes, I get to the house early to make sure everything is ready. I've already pulled out the tools he's getting and set them in boxes in the garage. Tyler shows up exactly at 10 driving a borrowed truck, and when he gets out, I can see he looks better than he did at mediation. He's showered and shaved, wearing clean clothes instead of the wrinkled shirt he had on last time. He stands in the driveway for a long moment just looking at the house, his eyes moving slowly across the front porch and up to the second-floor windows. I open the garage door and he walks over, moving carefully like he's not sure if he's really allowed to be here. He looks around the garage at all of Grandpa's stuff, the workbenches and tool chests and the oil stains on the concrete floor. He spends a long time just standing there taking it all in, and I realize he's probably seeing the place differently now that he knows it's never going to be his. We start loading the boxes into his truck without talking much at first. Tyler handles each tool carefully, examining the wrenches and socket sets like he's never really looked at them before. I show him where the extra drill bits are stored and he nods, setting them in a box with the other items. After we've loaded about half the stuff, he stops and leans against the truck bed. He tells me he never actually wanted to work at the shop when we were growing up. He says he thought manual labor was something beneath him, something for people who couldn't do anything better. His voice gets quiet as he admits that Esther made those feelings worse by constantly talking about their future success and how they'd hire people to do that kind of work for them. She used to make comments about the grease under Grandpa's fingernails and how she couldn't imagine doing physical work like that. Tyler says he realizes now how much that mindset cost him. Not just the house, but his whole relationship with Grandpa. He never learned the skills Grandpa tried to teach him because he was too busy thinking he was above it all. He pauses and looks down at his hands, which are clean and soft compared to Grandpa's calloused ones. He says he wishes he could go back and actually pay attention when Grandpa tried to show him things, but it's too late for that now. I tell Tyler to wait a minute and go inside the house. I've been keeping some of Grandpa's journals in the study, and I grab a few that I think might help Tyler understand. When I come back out, I hand him 3 journals from different years. I've marked certain pages with sticky notes, the entries where Grandpa wrote about Tyler. These aren't the harsh ones where Grandpa complained about Tyler's entitlement, but the ones that show Grandpa actually cared and wanted him to succeed. Tyler sits on the tailgate of the truck and starts reading. His eyes move slowly across Grandpa's handwriting, taking in words that were never meant for him to see. One entry talks about how Tyler was smart and could do anything he set his mind to if he'd just apply himself. Another mentions hoping Tyler would eventually understand the value of honest work. Tyler's hands start shaking as he reads and tears run down his face, dropping onto the pages. He says he wishes Grandpa had been more direct about his disappointment instead of just quietly judging him from a distance. I point out that Grandpa did try to give advice, lots of times over the years. Tyler just never wanted to hear it because he thought Grandpa was old-fashioned and didn't understand the modern world. Tyler closes the journals and sits there quietly for a minute, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. We end up having the most honest conversation we've had in years, maybe ever. Tyler admits he always felt like he had to compete with me growing up. He says he resented how easily things seemed to come to me, how I got good grades without trying as hard, and how Grandpa always seemed proud of me. He thought being the oldest and being a son should have counted for something, should have given him an automatic advantage, but instead he felt like he was always chasing after me, always trying to prove he was just as good or better. I tell him that things didn't come easily to me at all, that I worked really hard for everything I got. I just didn't complain about it or expect things to be handed to me without effort. I spent those summers at the shop actually learning and paying attention, not just showing up to collect a paycheck. Tyler sits with that for a moment and then nods slowly. He says that's a fair point, and he can see now how his attitude held him back. He admits he spent so much energy feeling entitled and resentful that he never actually did the work to earn what he thought he deserved. We talk for almost 2 hours sitting there in the driveway, and it feels different from any conversation we've had before. There's no pretending or performing, just two people being honest about their mistakes and disappointments. The following week, Gilbert Thornton officially files paperwork withdrawing the will contest. My estate lawyer calls to confirm that the house is now legally and completely mine with no further challenges possible. She says the court has accepted the settlement and closed the case. The relief I feel when she tells me this is huge, like a weight lifting off my shoulders that I didn't even realize how heavy it was. But the relief is mixed with sadness about everything that happened to get here. Our family went through something that changed us all, and I'm not sure if those changes are permanent or if we can ever get back to how things were before. I also don't know if my relationship with Tyler can ever be fully repaired, or if there will always be this underlying tension between us. Mom calls that same day to tell me that Tyler used part of the settlement money to start paying down his debt. She says he moved into a cheaper apartment across town, a small one-bedroom place that's nothing fancy, but it's clean and affordable. She also mentions that Tyler started seeing a therapist to work through his identity issues around being adopted and his relationship patterns. She sounds more hopeful than she has in months when she talks about him, saying she thinks he's finally taking responsibility for his life, instead of blaming everyone else for his problems. I spend a lot of time at Grandpa's house over the next few weeks, walking through rooms and deciding what to do with the place. I consider selling it because that would be the practical choice, the one that would give me the most financial security. But every time I think about putting it on the market, something stops me. This house represents Grandpa's life work. All those years he spent building something solid and lasting. It represents the summers I spent learning from him, the values he tried to pass down about hard work and integrity. Selling it would feel like giving up on all of that, like saying those things don't matter anymore. So I decide to keep the house and honor Grandpa's wishes and my own connection to the place. I start planning renovations, small projects I can tackle slowly over time. I'm doing some of the work myself using skills I learned at the shop, like replacing the old kitchen faucet and fixing the squeaky floorboards in the hallway. It feels good to work with my hands the way Grandpa did, to take something broken and make it whole again. Each repair I make feels like a way to stay connected to him, while also making the space my own. I paint the living room a soft gray color that Grandpa never would have chosen, but that makes the space feel fresh and new. I keep his workbench in the garage exactly as he left it, with his tools hanging on the pegboard in the same arrangement. The house is becoming something that honors the past, while also looking toward the future, and that feels right to me in a way I can't fully explain. 3 months after the reunion, our family has a much smaller gathering at my parents' house to celebrate Dad's birthday. But only about 15 people show up instead of the usual 40, and the atmosphere feels careful, like everyone's testing the waters to see if we can actually function as a family again. Tyler arrives on time carrying a store-bought cake, and he says hello to everyone without any of the tension or anger that marked our last family event. He's lost some weight and looks tired, but when he shakes Dad's hand and wishes him happy birthday, his smile seems real rather than forced. We end up in the kitchen together while I'm getting plates, and he asks how the house renovations are going. I tell him about the kitchen faucet I replaced and the squeaky floorboards I fixed, and he nods like he's actually interested instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. He mentions he got a job at an auto parts store across town, and while it's not glamorous, he's learning a lot about the business side of automotive work. The pay isn't great, only about $12 an hour, but he says it feels different earning his own money through actual work, rather than expecting opportunities to just appear because of who he thought he was. He talks about how the customers come in with specific car problems, and he's learning to match parts to needs, understanding how different components work together to keep vehicles running. It reminds him of what Grandpa tried to teach him all those summers ago, when he refused to work at the shop because he didn't want grease under his fingernails. Now he wishes he'd paid attention back then, instead of assuming manual work was beneath him. Mom pulls me aside during the party while Tyler's outside talking to Dad and Uncle Ray. She hugs me tight and thanks me for giving Tyler the settlement money, even though I didn't have to. She says showing him those journal entries from Grandpa made a real difference because Tyler could see that Grandpa loved him, but was disappointed in his choices, which hit harder than any lecture could have. She admits that she and Dad made serious mistakes by keeping the adoption secret for so many years, and that they thought they were protecting Tyler by not telling him, but really they were protecting themselves from difficult conversations. She also acknowledges that they favored Tyler in ways they didn't recognize at the time, making excuses for his behavior while taking my work ethic for granted. She's glad we're all getting a chance to be more honest with each other now, even though the path to honesty was painful and messy. I visit Grandpa's grave for the first time since the reunion a few days after the birthday party. The cemetery is quiet on a Tuesday afternoon, and I sit on the grass next to his headstone for a long time before I can figure out what to say. I tell him about everything that happened at the reunion, about Tyler's public accusation, and my response with the adoption papers. I explain about the legal fight and the settlement, about Tyler losing Esther and his job and having to face who he'd become. I thank him for trusting me with the house and for seeing something in me that I didn't always see in myself. All those summers at the shop, he was teaching me more than just how to fix cars and handle tools. He was showing me the value of work itself, the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again through skill and effort. I promise to take care of the place and make him proud, to honor what he built while also making the space my own. Tyler texts me a few days later asking if he can stop by the house sometime to help with renovations. He says he'd like to learn more about the kind of work Grandpa did, and maybe I could show him some of the basics of home repair. I'm surprised by the request because Tyler spent years avoiding anything that might get his hands dirty, but I agree to give him a chance. The following weekend, he shows up at 9 in the morning with his own tools, a basic set he bought from the auto parts store where he works. We spend the day working on refinishing the hardwood floors in the living room, starting with sanding down the old finish to expose the raw wood underneath. Tyler follows my instructions carefully, asking questions about grain direction and grit progression instead of pretending he already knows everything. We work mostly in silence except for when I'm explaining a technique or he's asking for clarification, and the physical labor feels like a better way to rebuild our relationship than sitting down for some forced heart-to-heart conversation. Working together on the house becomes a regular thing over the next few weeks. Tyler shows up every Saturday morning and we tackle different projects depending on what needs doing. We repaint the bathroom, replace rotted boards on the back porch, fix the leaky pipe under the kitchen sink. He asks questions about the shop and about Grandpa, really listening to the answers instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. I can see genuine changes in how he approaches things, more patience and less assumption that everything should come easily. He admits he never understood why Grandpa cared so much about doing things right the first time, but now that he's actually working with his hands, he gets it. Rushing through a job just means you have to do it again later, and there's real satisfaction in completing something properly, even if it takes longer. Tyler admits one day while we're taking a break from painting the guest bedroom that he's grateful the whole situation happened. We're sitting on the floor with paint-splattered clothes, drinking water from old mason jars, and he says losing everything forced him to confront who he'd become. He says losing Esther hurt at first, but looking back, he realizes they were in a relationship based on money and status, rather than genuine connection. She liked the idea of dating someone who would inherit property and have financial security, not the actual person he was. Now he's working on figuring out what he actually values in life beyond material success, and it's harder than he expected because he spent so many years defining himself by external markers of achievement. 4 months after the reunion, our extended family has another gathering, this time at the house I inherited. I invite everyone to see the renovations and to celebrate Grandpa's memory properly, and about 25 relatives show up. The atmosphere is completely different from the tense reunion where this all started. People walk through the rooms commenting on the refinished floors and fresh paint, and several relatives specifically mention noticing the work Tyler and I did together. Uncle Ray makes a toast to Grandpa and to family, acknowledging that we've been through a rough period, but came out stronger for it. He says families aren't perfect, and sometimes the truth hurts, but hiding from truth hurts even more in the long run. Several relatives comment on how good the house looks, and compliment the work Tyler and I did together, and I can see people visibly relaxing as they realize our family isn't permanently broken by what happened. Tyler gives a short speech thanking me for giving him a chance to be part of the house's renovation, and for helping him understand what Grandpa was trying to teach him all along. He's not completely transformed into a different person, and I know he still has work to do on himself, but he's genuinely trying to grow and learn from his mistakes, and that's more than I expected a few months ago. Esther walks through the front door about an hour into the gathering with some guy I've never seen before, her hand locked around his arm like she's making a statement. She's wearing a dress that's way too fancy for a casual family thing, and her laugh carries across the room in that fake way she used to do when Tyler's friends were around. I glance over at Tyler, who's helping Uncle Ray move some chairs, and he looks up when Esther's voice gets louder, then just goes back to what he's doing without any change in his expression. The new boyfriend is tall and wearing an expensive watch that catches the light every time he moves his hand, and Esther keeps touching his chest and looking around to see who's watching. Mom greets them politely because she's too nice to make things awkward, and Esther introduces the guy as Janus from her marketing firm, making sure to mention that he just got promoted to senior director. Tyler walks past them to get more drinks from the kitchen, and Esther actually positions herself in his path, but he just nods and says it's good to see her before continuing on his way. I watch her face fall a little when he doesn't react the way she clearly wanted, and Janus looks confused about why they came in the first place. They stay for maybe 20 minutes, making uncomfortable small talk with relatives who don't really know what to say to them, before Esther announces they have dinner reservations and need to leave. After they're gone, Tyler finds me in the kitchen where I'm refilling the snack bowls, and he leans against the counter looking more relaxed than I've seen him in months. He tells me he's actually glad she moved on so fast because it proves what he suspected, that she was never interested in him as a person, just in what she thought he could provide. He says he's not looking to date anyone right now because he's focused on figuring out who he actually is, instead of jumping into another relationship where he tries to be whoever the other person wants. The conversation feels real and honest in a way our talks never used to be, and I realize we're actually communicating like adults instead of competing like we did our whole lives. So, Mom and Dad are standing together near the back window talking to Aunt Lisa, and I notice how much lighter they both seem, like some heavy weight got lifted off their shoulders. Dad catches my eye and gestures for me to come over, And when I do, he puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me he thinks all the forced honesty actually improved their relationship with both of us. He admits they spent years walking on eggshells trying to treat us exactly the same without addressing the real problems, and now they can have actual conversations instead of pretending everything's perfect. Mom adds that she wishes they'd been braver about the truth from the start, but she's grateful we're all talking openly now, even if it took a crisis to get here. The past few weekends of working on the house with Tyler have been surprisingly good, and I catch myself actually looking forward to his Saturday morning arrivals instead of dreading them. We're not as close as we were when we were little kids before all the competition. And resentment built up, and there's still some tension under the surface when certain topics come up. But we're building something new that feels more solid because it's based on honesty instead of assumptions. He asks real questions now about the work we're doing and about Grandpa's business, and he listens to the answers instead of just waiting for his turn to talk about himself. As the afternoon light starts to fade and people begin gathering their dishes and saying their goodbyes, I stand in the doorway between the living room and kitchen looking at my family scattered around Grandpa's house. Tyler is showing Uncle Ray something on his phone about the auto parts store where he works, actually engaged in the conversation instead of just trying to impress people. Mom is helping Aunt Lisa pack up leftover food, while Dad tells some story that has them both laughing. The house looks good with the fresh paint and refinished floors, but it looks even better filled with family who finally stopped pretending everything was fine and started dealing with the actual mess we created. The path here was ugly and painful, with public humiliation and legal threats and relationships that nearly broke completely, but somehow we ended up in a better place than where we started. Tyler is learning to be accountable and developing skills that will actually serve him instead of expecting everything to be handed over. Our parents are being honest about their mistakes instead of hiding behind good intentions. I have both the house I earned through years of actual work and a brother who's becoming someone I can respect, not because he's perfect, but because he's genuinely trying to grow. It feels like the kind of complicated, messy, imperfect resolution that Grandpa would have understood and maybe even appreciated, because he always said real life doesn't wrap up neat and clean like people want it to.